Hello students, hope you are fine with your families and enjoying your vacations. Today we will study a topic from chapter Electric Charge and Field. The topic is electric flux and subsequently we will study Gauss theorem. To understand electric flux and subsequently Gauss theorem, let us first understand what is an area vector. Suppose we draw any surface and we draw a normal outwards with this surface. Then this outward drawn normal would represent the direction of a vector called area vector. In our earlier classes we have found area of various shapes, but most of us considered area as a scalar quantity, whereas area is a vector quantity, and this area vector is having both magnitude and direction. The typical point to be noted is that it is always represented by a outward drawn normal. Same way we have other shapes like a cylinder which has a curved surface and two cross-sectional surfaces, so the area vectors would be outward drawn normals. You have a square or a rhombus for which the area vector would be an outward drawn normal. It can be a part of a cube as well. Thus, a plane area can be regarded as possessing both magnitude and direction. The magnitude is the amount of area which we would calculate, and the direction is represented by an outward drawn normal to the plane. This is how we represent the area vector, and the definition of area vector is given for your reference. Now, before going on Gauss theorem or before defining electric flux, let us understand flux of a vector field. The term flux implies some kind of flow. Flux is the property of any vector field. The electric flux is a property of electric field. Similarly, we can associate flux with, say, the flow of a liquid, so that will become velocity flux. Similarly, when there is a magnetic field, then we can have a term known as magnetic flux. So actually flux is something which can flow. Mathematically, to know what is flux, let us consider a region in which there are electric field lines. Now we have taken this electric field to be uniform. It is represented by vector E. Next, we consider a small area placed in this electric field, and here the electric field lines are crossing this area such that they are making an angle of 0 degree with the area vector of this area. That means the electric field lines are parallel to the area vector in this case. Another orientation of this area, if we rotate this area by 90 degrees, then the area vector would also rotate by 90 degrees and now would be upwards, or it will be at an angle of 90 degree from its previous orientation. The electric field, of course, is in the same direction. Another case can be like if this area is placed at some angle with the electric field, let that angle be theta. Then we can define a term called electric flux, which is associated with this area. And in these three cases, the electric flux in the first case would be EA, the electric flux in the second case would be 0, and the electric flux in the third case would be written Ea cos theta. The reason behind electric flux represented by this equation is that the electric flux is defined as the scalar product of vector field and the area vector. In the first case, the angle between vector field and area vector is 0 degree. So phi, which is a Greek letter used to represent electric flux, would be magnitude of electric field vector into magnitude of area vector into cos of angle between them, which is 0 degree in the first case. So cos 0 becomes 1. Hence, in the first case, phi is Ea. In the second case, theta becomes 90 degrees. Therefore, phi, which is Ea cos theta, would be Ea cos 90 degree, and it would become 0 because cos 90 is 0. For any other orientation, phi would be written as Ea cos theta, and theta will be the angle between area vector and electric field. Hence, mathematically, electric flux is defined as the dot product of field vector and area vector. Next, we would see some properties of electric flux. The first one is, theoretically, electric flux is defined as the number of electric field lines crossing an area placed in an electric field. But since imaginary lines are there, so we cannot actually measure electric field flux through this definition. Therefore, we need to measure the electric flux by a formula, phi is equals to E dot A. As the electric flux is scalar product or dot product of two vector quantities, hence it is a scalar quantity. Then, since the area vector is a outward normal, whenever the field lines will be leaving a surface, they would be in the direction of the area vector. Hence, the angle between area vector and electric field would be 0 degrees. Therefore, the flux would be considered as positive. Whereas, when these lines are entering a surface, so they would be making an angle of 180 degrees with the area vector. So in that case, the electric flux would be considered negative because the value of cos 180 is minus 1. SI unit and dimensional formula of electric flux are also given. You can note them down for your reference. Sometimes our area is very large and we cannot take the whole area at one go. So hence we divide this area into small area elements. This is especially of importance when the electric field is non-uniform and our area is not regular. In case the field E is non-uniform, we consider a closed surface lying inside that field and we divide our whole surface into small area elements, and then we add the flux through each of the small area elements to get the total electric flux associated with that surface. In case our number of area elements become infinite, then the total electric flux would be obtained by integrating the electric flux associated with each small area element, and this integration would be over a closed surface. As we all know that Coulomb's law was applicable on discrete charges only, and it could not be applied on continuous distribution of charges. Hence there was a need for a law which could be applied on continuous charges, and it was fulfilled by Gauss. Gauss gave a law in which it said that the electric flux, which was earlier defined as integration of dot product of electric field and area vector, would now be also equal to 1 upon epsilon times the charge enclosed by a closed surface. Here epsilon naught will be the permittivity of free space. To prove Gauss theorem, we consider a surface, and this surface encloses a charge q at any point O. The area of this surface is capital A. Now as the surface is irregular, so to calculate the total flux, first we need to divide this surface into smaller area elements. Let us take one such area element with an area dA, and first we would calculate the flux through this area element, and subsequently we would be integrating to get the total electric flux associated with the surface. Now this area element dA, it subtends a solid angle d omega at point A, and dA is the area vector of this area element. Electric field is pointed outwards. In this case we take our charge as positive, and the angle between electric field and area vector, let us assume it as theta. D omega is the solid angle subtended by this area element at point O. Now if we consider only this small area element dA, then the electric flux associated with this area would be E dot dA, and this E dot dA, it would be expanded as EdA cos theta by definition of dot product. Now if we look at this electric field E, then for a point charge, the expression for electric field at any distance r would be 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught q by r squared. Substituting this value of E in the equation of d phi, we get d phi as q upon 4 pi epsilon naught dA cos theta by r squared. Now this dA cos theta by r squared, actually it is area upon square of the radius, and this area upon square of the radius is nothing else but is defined as the solid angle which this area element subtends at this point O. So this quantity dA cos theta by r squared, it will be a solid angle d omega, and this d phi is the electric flux associated with this small area element dA. So to calculate the total electric flux associated with this whole surface, we need to integrate this d phi, and integrating d phi would give us q upon 4 pi epsilon naught, which is constant, out of integration, and in integration we have d omega. Now this d omega, that is total solid angle, its value will be 4 pi, because omega, that is the solid angle, is defined as area upon radius squared. So substituting the value of integration d omega as 4 pi, we are left out with q upon epsilon naught. So hence the total electric flux linked with this surface is q by epsilon naught, which proves Gauss theorem. For calculating the electric flux associated with any continuous distribution of charge, Gauss proposed that you need to imagine a Gaussian surface around that charge or charge distribution. Here are some examples of Gaussian surface, which is an hypothetical closed surface such that the electric field intensity at each point on the surface is same. For a point charge, the Gaussian surface would be a sphere. For a uniformly charged wire, the Gaussian surface would be a cylinder. And for a plane charged sheet, of course it is uniformly charged because Gauss law is more applicable on symmetric distribution of charges. The Gaussian surface would be another cylinder. This Gaussian surface helps us to calculate the electric field intensity due to continuous charge distribution. Now, as we calculated the electric field due to a point charge using Coulomb's law, the same can be done using Gauss law, and this would also be termed as deduction of Coulomb's law from Gauss law. Let us consider a charge Q placed at any point O, and we need to determine the electric field at a distance r from this charge. From this point of observation, we draw a Gaussian surface such that the area vector and the electric field, they are parallel outwards, and hence the total flux linked with this Gaussian surface would be integration E dot A, and E is uniform because it is same at all points of this Gaussian surface. So we would have dA inside integration, and if we add all such area, these all dA, if they are added, we would get the surface area of this whole sphere, and it would be 4 pi r squared. Now by Gauss theorem, we have electric flux, which is 1 upon epsilon times the charge enclosed by this Gaussian surface. So here, equating these two equations, we have E into 4 pi r squared is equals to Q upon epsilon naught. So E would be 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught Q by r squared. This is the field due to a single isolated charge, and the same was obtained by Coulomb's law as well. Now if we write an equation for force experienced by any charge placed at this point, which is at a distance r from this charge Q. So let Q naught be placed at this point, then the force experienced by this charge Q naught would be Q naught E, and which would be written as 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught Q naught by r squared. So hence we have obtained Coulomb's law from Gauss law. So what Coulomb said was corroborated by Gauss, but Coulomb's law could not be applied on continuous distribution of charges, whereas Gauss law could be applied on continuous distribution of charges. Another interesting point to know is that Gauss law will hold good only if Coulomb's law is an inverse square law. So here an explanation is given that if Coulomb's law was not an inverse square law, what would happen? So the conclusion is that if instead of r squared you had r cubed in Coulomb's law, then the electric flux would depend upon the size or the radius of the Gaussian surface, and this was contradictory to what Gauss said in his law. Hence, for Gauss law to hold good, Coulomb's law must be an inverse square law. Here certain continuous distribution of charges are taken, that is a wire charged uniformly, an area or a plane sheet you can say, and a cuboid, or you can take a sphere charged uniformly. For these three surfaces we define three quantities. For a line charge we define linear charge density, which is the ratio of charge to the length, and its SI unit is Coulomb per meter, denoted by Greek letter lambda. Similarly, we define surface charge density for an area, which would be the ratio of charge and area of the surface, and SI unit will be coulomb per meter square, denoted by sigma, another Greek letter. Similarly, for any volume, we define a quantity volume charge density denoted by rho, which is the ratio of charge to the volume of the surface, and its SI unit is coulomb per meter squared. If we apply Gauss law on these distribution of charges, that is a line charge or a plane sheet and a spherical shell, we would get the electric fields as shown. For a line charge, E is lambda upon 2 pi epsilon naught r, which shows that the electric field depends on the distance. Whereas for a plane sheet, the electric field is sigma upon 2 epsilon naught, which shows that electric field is independent of the distance. And for a spherical shell, the electric field at any point outside the shell is similar to that of a point charge. Whereas inside the shell, there is no electric field, because if a Gaussian surface is drawn inside, then it would not enclose any charge. Therefore, the field inside the spherical shell is 0. That's all for now. Go to my YouTube channel for more of physics of your interest. Thank you. Have a nice day.